Fast-track yourself through the race with vehicle and asset finance from Absa. Today, tomorrow, together.
For the off-road racing community, round 2 of the Absa Off-Road Championship meant a shift from the Western Cape to the Eastern Cape. The opening round of the series was run in Darling in the Western Cape, with round 2 based at Jeffreys Bay, which boasts the best right-hand point brake in the world. Surfers will know what that means, with Jeffreys Bay a mecca for international surfers who flock year-round to one of South Africa's best-known communities. Situated little more than an hour's drive from Port Elizabeth on the N2 highway, Jeffreys Bay is a vibrant and cosmopolitan town with a thriving local craft industry.
Situated on the outskirts of Jeffreys Bay, the Mentor's Kraal Country Estate provided the ideal base for the Eastern Cape 400, with a route running through the Gamtoos Valley and the Longmore forests. The resort was soon a hive of activity as teams set up shop, went through pre-race documentation and started preparing vehicles for the prologue that would determine start positions for the race.
Off-road racing prides itself on a family atmosphere, with races also providing a backdrop for old friends to renew acquaintances. But behind the relaxed facade, there's always an air of tension as technical crews ready their chargers for battle.
After the Edenko 400, the Donaldson Nissan crew of Duncan Foss and Rolf Pitchford led the production vehicle championship. 2 other Donaldson Nissan crews occupied top 5 places, along with 2 Toyota crews, slotting in among the Premier SP class teams with 2 crews from classes D and E.
Nissan factory driver Duncan Foss is the reigning South African champion, and a win on the Edenko 400 got his season off to a perfect start.
Went perfectly for us in Cape Town. Obviously, we're hoping to have a repeat of that this weekend. It's all gone well up until now. We've had a good test and the car's right, so hopefully we can do well.
And the forest sections, that's going to have a big influence.
Yeah, we're going to have to drive it differently from what we normally do in an off-road race. It's going to be a lot smoother, so we're going to have to treat it more like a rally section. It's going to be easier on the cars. But yeah, you just got to be really careful on the slippery sections, especially if they've had rain in the area. On the pine needles, it can get slippery, and in the shadows where the sun doesn't get to the route. But, you know, you just drive the race accordingly, and our cars are good in those type of conditions, so we're looking forward to it.
A pre-prologue mishap provided the Castle Toyota service crew with a little extra work, but factory driver Hein Latergan, a newcomer to the Toyota team, was still upbeat.
We've done a bit of testing with the cars and a lot more confident now. We know how much we can do with how we can attack the rough stuff, and that for me is what I must learn, you know, so I'm quite confident and I'm looking forward to it.
But the big difference going from rallies into one of these cars.
You ask me now, you know, you go around the corner, they flip over, you know, rally cars don't do that.
There was also a new face in the factory Ford racing team, with Thomas Rundle moving in among the SP class big boys after years of campaigning in Class E.
To be honest, it's a dream come true. It's what I've wanted since the beginning, since I started racing in 2002. And yeah, it's unbelievable. Being part of such a brilliant team, guys are, you know, a great bunch of guys. You know, it's unbelievable. You know, you can't compare it to a Class E car. It's completely different for me. You know, the other guys in the team are used to the old petrol SPs, but yeah, it's just SP is new for me.
A steep learning curve also awaited special vehicle category defector Gary Bertholdt.
Well, I think a lot of the competitiveness is in SP. There's still a tremendous amount in the special vehicles. But I think you need to try change every now and then. And in order to give Atlas Copco a little bit more exposure and try something different, we thought we'd go the SP route. It's an extremely steep learning curve. Newfound respect for all the SP drivers. I think they're very good, very fit. It's very demanding on the body. So I'm just going to take it easy and take the steep learning curve one step at a time.
Before the start of the prologue to determine start positions for the race, the top 5 drivers on the production vehicle seeding list draw for start positions. It's a little ceremony always conducted against a background of some good-natured barracking.
For the quicker teams, the pre-race prologue to determine start positions for the race proper takes on an important role. Starting off in pole position and being first on the road has one huge advantage: no dust. Off-road races are notoriously dusty affairs, and the prospect of setting out with a clear road in front turns prologues into cutthroat affairs, with Duncan Foss and Rolf Pitchford blitzing the other teams on the 60-kilometre route.
Hugo and Jaap de Bruin are one of many father and son combinations to be found in off-road racing. And after an unhappy outing at the Edenco 400, they bounced back to set the second fastest time, with the pair 28 seconds behind Foss and Pitchford. After tipping the Castrol Toyota Hilux on its side during a pre-prologue test run, Hein Lateghan and Chris Birkin hit back in emphatic fashion to set the third fastest time and trail Foss and Pitchford by 40 seconds.
The wily old veteran Hannes Grobler and Johan Moore set the fourth fastest time in another of the Donaldson Nissan Navara factory entries. In a stellar career spanning more than 30 years, the hugely popular Grobler has won championships on the track and in rallying and off-road. Moore is one of the new breed of young co-drivers in off-road and has struck up a solid relationship with Grobler in the car. To be successful, explicit trust and teamwork is needed between driver and co-driver in what are small, noisy and very uncomfortable mobile offices.
The top five in the prologue were rounded out by Chris Visser and Jaapie Badenhorst in the RFS Toyota Hilux. Visser and Badenhorst are reliable performers who got their season off to a good start with a podium finish in the Edenco 400. Here, they were 1 minute and 26 seconds adrift of Duncan Foss and Rolf Pitchford. SP-class newcomers Gary Berthold and Andre Vermeulen came up with an impressive start in the Atlas Copco Toyota Hilux and were closely followed by Dakar Rally heroes Ivar Tollefsen and Quinn Evans in the third Donaldson Nissan Navara. Next up were the husband and wife pairing of George and Sharon Barkhuizen in the AIM Toyota Hilux. Barkhuizen is a former motocross and kart champion, which is fine for an off-roader, but also listed among his achievements is playing underwater hockey for the Orange Free State.
Young Chris de Plooy and Henk van Vieren put together a solid prologue in the RFS Toyota Hilux, and Thomas Rundle, with the experienced Henny ter Steege alongside him, quickly settled into life in an SP-class vehicle.
In his first Class SP drive, Rundle and ter Steege were quicker than former champions Neil Woolridge and Kenny Scholthammer, who were giving the new factory twin-turbo diesel Ford Ranger its first outing. In their defense, the experienced Woolridge and Scholthammer lost time changing a flat wheel on what was a tight and rough route that often required extreme caution.
There were some disinterested and some interested spectators along the route, with the Transcore Ford Ranger pair of Graham Leith and Mike Lawrenson hampered by an engine misfire. Behind them and running at the back of the field after a steering problem saw them miss their start time, Anthony Taylor and Robin Houghton posted a time that would have placed them 7th on the grid. For missing their start time, the unfortunate Castrol Toyota Works crew was hit with a 15-minute penalty, and that dropped them right to the back of the field.
While service crews restored vehicles to full health for the next day's battle, and with first on the road in the bag, Duncan Foss had every reason to be pleased with his afternoon's work.
This is the first time we've been to Jeffreys Bay, and so far it's been really good to us. And you know, everyone had a chance to test on the test section, which was great. It gives everyone an equal opportunity. But yeah, you know, it's really nice. The route is different from what we experienced in the Cape, but our car seems to be as equally as good in whatever conditions we race in, so we're looking forward to tomorrow.
Hein Lateghan has joined the Castrol Toyota team from the rally ranks and is finding the switch physically challenging.
You really get tired with the steering, and so we've done 50 Ks. It's just only over 10%, you know, so tomorrow's going to be a tough day, you know. So I'll just have a good pace. I mean, we didn't push too hard on the prologue. I mean, I all the time tried to keep it on the wheels after the roll this morning, you know. So I think we will have a nice pace.
The factory Ford Ranger team is entering uncharted waters, but former champion Neil Woolridge foresees other teams going the diesel route.
I must say, if anyone had told me changing over to diesel would be so different, I might not have done it, to be quite honest. It's been a huge learning curve for us, but we're very happy with the car. It's a brand new 5-cylinder 3.2 turbo diesel running 2 twin turbos, and Ford Motor Company is the first to go that route. We've seen motor manufacturers overseas in the Dakar and all the rally raid events over there also go the diesel route with great success. So we're the first one to step into that line. You know, it's a whole new learning curve for us, and I've no doubt we're still going to be learning all year. But we felt it important to take that step. Ford Motor Company have strong feelings about the diesel route, and we definitely think that that's the way of the future.
The fastest time in Class E went to Lauderbrain and Rian Geiling in the Rubicon Ford Ranger, previously campaigned by factory driver Jack Beckham. The Bloemfontein-based pair were just 7 seconds ahead of Denko 400 winners Dion Venter and Ian Palmer in the 4x4 Mega World Toyota Hilux. Hot on their heels were Papi Rubeluza and Kulele Vakaliza in the factory Ford Ranger, with less than a minute covering the three cars.
The veteran Raconics Nissan hardbody pair of Kutsia Labuskaghni and Johan Gerber set the pace in Class D. Labuskaghni and Gerber were nearly a minute quicker than Dewald van Breda and Johan de Toy in the Northam Toyota Hilux 4D4, with the Denko 400 winners Cliff and Louis Weichelt a further 3 minutes in arrears after a boost pipe broke on the N1 4x4 Toyota Hilux D4D. Class D pace setter Labuskaghni was gearing up for a tough race.
Well, you know, from the times there when the guys put the helmets on, the red mist, like the guy says, take over, but you got to have controlled aggression with it, you know. Basically, you haven't got the suspensions which the SPs and the Class A cars got, so you got to preserve the car there. You got to take it a little bit slow, and you got to be careful with it.
The special vehicle category has lost a couple of high-profile crews to the production vehicle ranks, with drivers like Gary Berthold and former SA champion Terence Marsh among the defectors. But such is the depth of talent in South African off-road racing that a half a dozen or more crews are capable of winning races, and new talent is filtering into off-road racing via other branches of motor racing.
After winning the Adenko 400 first time out in a brand new car, former champions Evan Hutchinson and Achim Bergman led the overall and Class A championships going into the Eastern Cape 400. Class P leaders Johan and Etienne Besadenhout were in the top 5, with 4 Class B crews in the top 10.
A win first time out in the Motorite Revo 1 4x4 car gave Evan Hutchison and Achim Bergman a dream start to the season.
We were, I'd like to say, lucky at the last event. You know, it was a new car and we did have a few little problems, and with the misfortune of some of the other competitors while we got to the end. But yeah, congratulations to the team on making sure we were there to take the win. So we're very happy about that. Second time out in the car, it's almost the same plan. You know, we're here to finish. That's all we're really worried about, is get the car to the end and make sure that the small changes we've made have been good for us.
Back in the harness after missing the first event of the year were former Class B champions Jan and Hendrik Kraai, with the pair now campaigning in Class P.
Yeah, no, we've just put a new motor into our car, so we've moved up a class to the P class. So yeah, we're looking forward to it. Lots of hard work.
And a very competitive class that you're going into now.
Yeah, I know it is. All of the guys that were in Class B have all moved up to Class P now, so it's going to be exciting. It's going to be nice.
Derek de Toy and Ian Pienaar are a Cape Town-based team and had Class B podium finishes in their sights.
Basically, we wanted to continue and run for podium all the time. We had a bit of problems in Darling and we came third there, but we believe that we're in a chance. We've got a solid car. We just redid the engine now, and I think everything bodes well for the future. I mean, we really want to try and see if we can't be on the podium for the championship.
The top 5-seeded drivers in the special vehicle category also draw lots for start positions for the prologue. And as with the production car brigade, the name of the prologue game is to finish as high up as is possible.
Colin Matthews and Alan Smith are chargers, but the Century Racing crew out in a bat are still looking for their first national championship win. There's no doubting their pace, but Matthews and Smith tend to blow hot and cold, and off-road fundies will tell you that consistency is a sought-after ingredient when it comes to winning championships. As always, they attack the prologue aggressively, but were 13 seconds slower than overall leaders Duncan Foss and Ralph Pitchford, and were only 3 seconds quicker than Evan Hutchison and Achim Bergman in the highly impressive 4x4 Motorite Revo 1.
super stuff from an onboard camera.
Two production vehicle cars were sandwiched between Hutchison and Bergman and Collie and Quinton Sulwalt in the Sulwalt Racing Bat. A puncture 10 kilometers from the finish robbed them of a win on the opening event, but they were again right on the pace, with Will Battersfield and Reg Sutton springing a slight surprise by setting the fourth fastest time. Former champion Shamir Variawa and Siegfried Rousseau were also up with the leaders in the total porter and rounded out the top 5.
KwaZulu-Natal crew Clint Gibson and Gary Campbell were going well in the Gibson Racing Bat, although the pair were just 7 seconds up on veterans Nardis Albers and Jeff Minute in the Rapsa Bat. They were going along steadily, but Alberts and Minute were coming under pressure from Lesotho crew John Moore and Leander Pienaar, who were out in the Groove Bar Chev. For their part, the Lesotho team were under some pressure from Mike Whitehouse and brother-in-law Matthew Carlson in the Regent Racing Bat. There was only a half a minute between 4 cars in what had developed into an interesting little cameo performance.
The first 5 cars in the prologue were separated by just over a minute, with the route and the roadbook coming in for high praise from Colin Matthews and Alan Smith.
The route was lovely. It was very nice and tight. It was just a lot of everything. We had smooth sand roads, we had tight stuff, we had some hair-raising stuff. It was lovely. It was really, really a nice route.
And the navigation, Alan, was tell us about the new format on the roadbook.
The format, I'd say, was a lot better than the last time. Tight, lots of instructions, but very well marked and very well set out. Very happy.
There was a close battle in Class P with KwaZulu-Natal pair Don Thompson and Don Blakely in a Zarko Light, locked in battle with former Class B champions Jan and Hendrik Kraai in the Keymax Bat. The scales finally tipped the way of the KwaZulu-Natal pair, but there was only 4 seconds in it.
Third place in Class P went to brothers David and Gary White in the Rokon Racing Bat, with the pair only 2 seconds ahead of Class B frontrunners Bez and Dion Besaidnout in the Adenko Bat. The Besaidnouts, with Dad doing the driving and son Dion the navigating, won the Adenko 400 and were in search of a repeat result.
Vehicle and asset finance from ABSA. Going the extra mile to ABSA. Going off the beaten track to find solutions.
Gone are the days when off-road races used to start before dawn. Nowadays, the only people who have to get up before dawn are television cameramen who have instructions to get sunrise shots. Good news for competitors was that a brisk wind had blown up overnight, and this would help with the dust problem. There was also overnight rain in some areas, with all the signs pointing towards a dramatic race.
After a disappointing prologue, former champion Shamir Variawa and Siegfried Rousseau would start 11th on the road and had some hard work ahead of them.
Yes, yesterday we lost about a minute and a half in the prologue. It was a steep downhill and hairpin right, and I braked a bit too late, so I tipped the car over the hairpin and we couldn't get the car out. About a minute and a half it took us. Eventually we got the car out, so we lost that time. Today we'll see, we'll try and make it up.
The Donaldson-Nissen crew of Duncan Foss and Rolf Pitchford were the first crew to be flagged away at the start. Behind them, cars took off at gaps determined by their finish positions on the day 1 prologue. There was a time when cars were flagged off after 2-minute dust gaps, and races were decided on corrected time. Those days, like the pre-dawn starts, are also a thing of the past. Race organisers have been asked by the Motorsport SA Off-Road Car Racing Commission to make routes a little more technical this year. The organisers of the Eastern Cape 400, the Algoa Motorsport Club, followed instructions, but it was clear right from the start that the pace was going to be relentless.
The move towards more technical routes had been motivated by safety concerns. The latest technology and space-age components have seen cars in both the production and special vehicle categories simply get quicker and quicker. There's also a prevailing school of thought that off-road racing is not all about speed, and that races should also be a test of durability and stamina on the part of both man and machinery.
Out on the route, Duncan Foss and Rolf Pitchford had run into problems, and Colin Matthews and Alan Smith were running at the front of the field in the Century Racing Bat. They had Evan Hutchinson and Achim Bergman right on their heels, with the Motorite Revo 1 4x4 crew looking to apply as much pressure as was possible and force a mistake out of Matthews and Smith.
Duncan Foss and Rolf Pitchford were forced to stop when a stone severed a brake pipe, and Hicho and Jaap de Bruin took over the production vehicle lead in the Mickelin Excel Toyota Hilux. Hannes Grobler and Johan Moore made up 30 seconds on Hein Latergan and Chris Birkin and were now running in second place. Grobler relishes the challenge of chasing down cars ahead of him and was on a charge. Latergan, in only his second off-road race, was also going along steadily enough, and when Duncan Foss and Rolf Pitchford managed to get going again, they had dropped to 25th on the road.
Behind the Latergan-Birkin Castrol Toyota, there was a high-speed train led by reigning SA champions Cully and Quinton Sulwald in the Sulwald Racing Bat. Hot on their heels were Chris Visser and Jaapie Badenhorst in the RFS Toyota, and they had Will Battershill and Reg Sutton in their mirrors. Battershill and Sutton were nearly 2 minutes behind the leading car and were being chased by Gary Berthold and Andre Vermeulen in the Atlas Copco Toyota Hilux, who looked menacing in their SP Class debut. Behind them, Shamir Variawa and Siegfried Rousseau were pushing hard in the Total Porter, and they had Ivar Tollefson and Quinn Evans in close attendance in the third of the factory Donaldson Nissan Navaras.
Further back in the field, Clint Gibson and Gary Campbell were going along steadily in the Gibson Racing Bat and were keeping ahead of the Rapsa Bat in the hands of Nardis Alberts and Jeff Minute. On a tight route, overtaking was a tricky business and more often than not needed the cooperation of the other crew. Mike Whitehouse and Matthew Carlson picked up a place in the Regent Racing Bat when John Moore and Leander Pienaar kindly moved over.
Whitehouse spent a couple of seasons co-driving alongside former SA champion Terence Marsh and is now in his second season as a driver. The pair got past Moore and Pienaar easily enough and were closing in on Nardis Alberts and Jeff Minute in the Rapsa car. Alberts and Minute had been around the block once or twice, and getting past them was going to be a different kettle of fish. Not only that, but being right behind a Class A car when it throws up stones and rocks can be a nasty experience.
The hapless John Moore and Leander Pienaar were coming under attack from all directions. Next to force their way past the Lesotho pair were Class P leaders Don Thompson and Don Blakey in the Zarko. A good battle was in the offing between Thompson, Blakey and Jan and Hendrik Kraai in the Keymax Bat. Right on their heels were George and Sharon Barkhuizen in the AIM Toyota Hilux, and they had an ailing Chris de Plooy suffering the after effects of a bout of tick bite fever, and Henk van Vieren chasing after them in the RFS Toyota Hilux. Also in this little gaggle of cars were Kobus van Tonde and Rian Guapa in the Unifreight Ford Ranger, and newcomers Jimmy Zahus and Stefan Kutsia in the nicely turned out Mountain Dew Porter. Behind them, Limpopo crew Naeem Mossaji and Mohammed Molston were backing an engine misfire in the Tyre Rack Porter, and an overshoot did nothing for their cause.
SP Class rookie Thomas Rundle was going along nicely in the factory Ford Ranger and had the benefit of the vastly experienced Henny Testiger alongside him. The Ford was being chased by brothers David and Gary White in the Ruacon Racing Bat, with the pair looking to close in on the Class P leaders. Also trying to move up through the field were former SA champions Neil Woolridge and Kenny Shorthammer in the new turbo diesel Ford Ranger, which was proving to be a little recalcitrant.
Woolridge and Shorthammer both raced motorcycles with considerable success, including Roof of Africa wins before turning to four wheels. Racing is in the Woolridge blood, with Neil's two sons showing plenty of promise at regional level.
Holding station behind the Ford were Herman Sulwald and son Bichard in the Sulwald Racing Zarko. Also holding station were Graham Leith and Mike Lawrenson, who these days campaign the Ford Ranger, previously in the hands of off-road legend Alfie Cox and Henny Testiger. Leith and Lawrenson were going along steadily enough, but were being closed down by Nick and Ryan Harper in the Atlas Copco Bat. The Harpers lost 10 minutes on the prologue with a fan belt problem, but had made up 3 places. Back on the road and carving their way through the field were Duncan Force and Rolf Pitchford, who weren't taking any prisoners. There was a close fight going on between Class P contenders Johan and Etienne Besadenhout and Johan van Staden and James Rousseau. And behind them, the battle for the lead in Class E had reached a climax. Dion Venter and Ian Palmer were trying to find a way around Louw de Bruin and Rian Greling, with the Rubicon Ford crew having nothing of it.
There were problems for veteran road racer Bodo Berthold and Philip Herselman when they beached the Atlas Copco Bat running in Class P.
When Kutsia Labuschagne and Johan Gerber arrived on the scene, the Atlas Copco was blocking the road. Labuschagne, who modestly admits to playing a few games of rugby for the Blue Bulls in days gone by, had to take a slight detour. Labuschagne and Gerber, who are business partners, have been racing together for more than 20 years and were looking to bounce back from a disappointing Adenko 400 when a blown engine halted their race.
The unfortunate Berthold and Herselman were struggling to get the Atlas Copco car mobile again, but were not the only ones with problems. Dewald van Breda and Johan de Toy were stuck in a gully in the Northam Toyota Hilux, and a line of cars had formed behind them. A friendly farmer with a tractor helped extricate the Toyota, with Van Breda and de Toy losing time in the Class D battle.
With Van Breda and de Toy out of the way, the other cars could get going again. First in line were reigning Class E champions Jannie Visser and Jorgs Leroux in the RFS Toyota. No problem for them. And Picky Labuschagne and Rikus Erasmus also had no problems in the second 4x4 Mega World Toyota Hilux. The father and son pair of Glenn and Rob Gibson were running steadily in the Gibson Racing Adenko, with Bapi Rubeluza and Kulili Vakaliza also having a good run in the factory Ford Ranger.
And now a trip down memory lane, belting along in an ancient race car where Lesotho crew Keith de Toy and veteran co-driver Ashley Thorne. Behind the race car Adenko 400 class winners, Cliff and Louis Weichert were in a more modern Toyota Hilux, and after prologue problems were looking to close in on the Class D cars ahead of them. There was no further forward progress for Bodo Berthold and Philip Herselman, who was still firmly beached, with John Telford and Jaco Swart looking for a way around them. Anthony Taylor and Robin Houghton were on a charge in the factory Castrol Toyota and were closing in on Micron Excel Toyota of off-road newcomers Henny Strumper and Jan Hendrik van der Linde.
The intrepid Grant Watkins was battling along in the Gecko Special and having to combine driving with navigating. Behind Watkins, the Atlas Copco Bat of Bodo Berthold and Philip Herselman was mobile again, but progress was sometimes a little erratic, and the pair gave the marshal at a checkpoint a bit of a scare.
Berthold and Herselman left a little debris behind them, but a helpful spectator was on hand to do a little housework. The track was clear when Richard Schilling and Chris Davies appeared on the scene, but the marshal was still a little on the nervous side.
After breaking a shock absorber on the prologue, Mark Corbett and Rudy Balzo were pushing hard in the Century Racing 4x4. Another broken shock absorber would put them out of the running. And also in the wars were Terence Marsh and Peter Groenewald in the Regent Racing Nissan Navara. Major suspension and drivetrain damage on the prologue saw them start at the back of the field, with the pair destined for retirement in what would be Groenewald's second non-finish in more than 2 years of racing. Cape crew Derek de Toy and Ian Palmer also started from the back of the field in the Orange Tree Bat, and were also headed for retirement along with the track and kart star Leroy Poulter and Rob Howie in the Ferodo Nissan Hardbody.
Vehicle and asset finance from ABSA, overcoming all to get you financed.
The Eastern Cape 400 was run over 2 loops of a 160-kilometer route that took in new territory in the Gamtoos Valley. Also on the agenda was a trip into the Longmore Forest, which for years has formed part of the route on the Volkswagen National Championship Rally. At a D-control at the end of racing section 1, Colin Matthews and Alan Smith led Evan Hutchison and Achim Bergman, with Hicho and Jaap de Bruin leading the production vehicle category.
Well, we're very fortunate. Duncan had a problem. I don't know if it's a puncture or... but luckily we passed him, and I think we're the first SP on the road. No, I think so. We definitely... But tight. We have to... Very slippery. Very, very slippery. You have to be very cut foot. Otherwise you can make a big mistake.
I mean, it's going all right. It's a bit slippery today. There's some mud in the forest, so we're battling a bit to get the car to steer in. And unfortunately, I followed one of the sand marks of the wrong route, so it was one mistake and Hannes got past.
Quinn Evans and Ivar Tollefsen had dropped a few places, but were looking to use the forest to regain lost ground.
It's going well. The track's quite rough now, but we had a couple of mistakes in that first section, a couple of overshoots. It's very slippy, so we're just trying to claw back some time on the cars in front now.
It did not take long for the forest section to see a change in the pecking order on the road, with a Century Racing bat of Colin Matthews and Alan Smith the first major casualty at the front end of the field. The demise of the Century Racing bat left former champions Evan Hutchison and Achim Bergman leading the special vehicles in the Motorrad Revo 1 4x4, with the pair third on the road behind the De Bruin Toyota and the Grobler Moore Nissan Navara.
The factory Castrol Toyota of Hein Lateghan and Chris Birkin was just over a minute behind the De Bruins, and they were being chased down by a fired-up Duncan Force and Rolf Pitchford, who were on a mission. They had made up around 5 minutes on the leaders and were scything through the field with the Nissan's engine note sounding glorious.
KwaZulu-Natal crew Clint Gibson and Gary Campbell were 6 minutes adrift of the lead special vehicle, but were in good shape in the Gibson Racing bat and looked to be on course for a good finish. The solid Mike Whitehouse and Matthew Carson had taken the Regent Racing bat ahead of the Rapsa car of Nardis Alberts and Jeff Minnett. Alberts and Minnett were also looking comfortable with a good finish in the offing, but behind them, former champion Shamir Varayawa and Siegfried Rousseau were also on the move in the Total Porter and closing in on the Rapsa and Regent Racing entries.
Ivar Tollefsen and Quinn Evans were starting to shift up a gear, and behind them Jan and Hendrik Kraai, who were sharing driving and co-driving duties, had taken control of Class P in the Keymax Bat and were in among the Class A cars. After losing time on the prologue, Nick and Ryan Harper had made steady progress through the field in the Atlas Copco Bat and were looking strong. John Moore and Leander Pinar had lost a couple of places in the Group Bar Chev, but were running steadily without attempting any heroics.
The two SP class rookies, Thomas Rundle in the Factory Ford Racing Ranger and Gary Bertholdt in the Atlas Copco Toyota Hilux, were both putting in impressive performances. The Ford was looking a little worse for wear, but that was par for the course on a demanding route. Class P champions Johan and Etienne Besaidnout had dropped behind class leaders Jan and Hendrik Kraai, but were looking solid with the equally solid Chris Visser and Japie Badenhorst in the RFS Toyota Hilux, turning in another trademark performance. Johan van Staden and James Rousseau were still in the thick of things of the Class P fight and were also putting together an impressive drive.
Still struggling with an engine misfire, Naeem Musaji and Mohammed Mulston were struggling a bit in the tyre rack Jimco and had dropped off the pace. Also struggling a little were reigning SA champions Cully and Quinton Sulwald, who'd picked up a couple of punctures and twice went off the road. They were being chased by George and Sharon Barkhazen, with the AIM Toyota Hilux showing definite signs of wear and tear.
Former quad racer Jimmy Zahos, partnered by Stefan Kutsia, wasn't happy with the suspension setup in the Mountain Dew Porter, and a flat early on in the race also set them back. They were pushing hard to make up time and were pulling away from Dion Fenter and Ian Palmer, who'd taken charge of Class E in the 4x4 Mega World Toyota Hilux.
Graham Tim Leith and Mike Lawrenson in the Transcorp Ford Ranger were sandwiched between Class E leaders Venter Palmer and the Rurcon Racing Ford of Louw de Bruin and Rian Greyling. The Rurcon car had developed a clutch problem and de Bruin and Greyling had dropped a little off the pace. Behind them, Herman and Wichard Sulwald stopped for what they thought was a puncture, only to find nothing wrong with the car. While last season's Rookies of the Year, Dewald van Breda and Johan de Toy, had recovered well after their earlier problems with the Toyota Hilux D4D sounding healthy.
In only their second race, Pikkie Labuschagne and Rikus Erasmus were having a good run in the second 4x4 Mega World Toyota Hilux, and it was all very amusing for some of the locals.
Coetzee Labuschagne and Johan Gerber were soldiering on in the Raceonics Nissan and were running second in Class D behind the Van Breda de Toy Toyota Hilux. In hot pursuit of the Nissan were Henny Stroomfer and Jan Hendrik van der Linde in the Mickerin XL Toyota Hilux.
After a previous false alarm, Herman Sulwald and son Wichard finally had to stop to change a flat tyre. Bapi Rubeluza went past while they were busy with the Sulwalds needing to juggle tyres after running out of spare wheels.
Nee, ons gaan 'n papwiel voorop sit en ons die twee agter sit. Maar ry ons met voor. Net tot hierdie.
Up ahead at the end of the forest section, an ill Christian Deploy and Henk Janssen van Vieren called it a day in the RFS Toyota Hilux, along with Neil Woolridge and Kenny Scholthammer in the new Ford Ranger.
It looks like the solenoid on the electrics has gone, just the solenoid. Nothing, it was going well, going fantastic. Yeah, just unfortunately an electrical problem. And that's it, a little bit of windscreen damage from the frames. Otherwise the car was fantastic today.
Back at the service park at Mentos Kroll, technical crew was swinging into action as the first cars arrived after completing the first loop.
Yes, I must say we did well up to now. It was very tight and it's not easy. And if you look at the time we took to finish this first section, I think it's going to be tough out there for the next section as well.
And in the forest, very slippery up there?
It was very slippery, I think, for the first few guys. I think the second lap will be a lot better. A few guys went off the road, but we managed to stay on the road. We didn't take chances, and we're leading at the moment, and we're very glad.
As is always the case, there were one or two sob stories at the service park, but one driver satisfied with his day so far was Thomas Rundle.
It's been a good morning. We had a flat early on, about 12 k's in, but yeah, after that it's been good. We've caught a couple of guys, so it's been going well.
You settling into the vehicle?
Yeah, it's getting a lot better, much better than yesterday, I must be honest. So yeah, it's exciting.
The Rapsa crew are staunch Blue Bulls rugby supporters, and for the moment they had other matters on their minds. But driver Nardus Alberts was having fun.
So far so good. We had we started 7th, I think, and we're somewhere 4th now. I had quite one of those awes that most of us has had. So Michael came past me, but now we start racing.
Any exciting moments out there?
Every minute is an exciting one. There's a lot of spots where you can go either way. But it's fun.
Over at the Atlas Copco pit, top of the agenda was to fix the brakes on the Toyota.
We started off very well, you know, the cars were holding each other up because we started here like seconds apart. That was bad for the first 40, 50 k's till we got to the forest. And luckily, me coming from a rally background, most of those forest stages we've been doing for years and years in the rally. And then we were fast. We caught like 4 or 5 cars at a time. The cars were holding each other up because, you know, the guys are not used to these mountain stages. And then at about 80 k's into the stage, we lost all brakes. We've been doing the last 100 k's without any brakes in the car.
One of the tightest battles was in Class P, where there was little to choose between the 3 leading crews.
It's hot outside, tight in the bush. We lost one of the sissy bars on the side, tight corners. I must say, the most technical we've done in a long time. And competition is tough, but we're seconds apart from one another. It started like that, it ended like that. I think the second loop's going to be even worse because we have to take out all stops to make a difference. That's going well.
At the end of Loop 1, just 3 seconds separated the first 2 production vehicles. And from 25th, Duncan Foss and Rolf Pitchford had worked their way back to 4th. A fine performance had also taken Dion Fenter and Ian Palmer into the top 10 in a Class E vehicle.
The 4x4 Mega World team were looking for their second Class E win in a row and looked to be in good shape.
Yeah, very good. We just got held up for the first 24 Ks behind the Ford E-Class Ford. He wouldn't give us a gap past, but we bit of motivation, we got past him, and so far we had a very clean run.
No trouble out there?
No trouble out there. Brakes faded a bit, but don't think it's anything serious.
The mood in the Northam Toyota camp, where they like to bring a little humour into their racing, was also upbeat.
Devold, how's your morning been?
No, very well, very well. It's been hot and jumpy, but very nice. No.
And how was the forest section?
Forest section is like a rally, so you can pace up. It's very nice, and you cover kilos very quickly. But the first section is very nice to be in the beginning, and the rough section, the forest section secondly. So you relax a bit. It's not that rough on yourself.
At the front of the special vehicle field, Evan Hutchison and Achim Bergman had a whopping 6-minute lead over Clint Gibson and Gary Campbell. The Cries were leading what was a tight Class P battle, and John Moore and Leander Pienaar were also holding down a top 10 spot.
Vehicle and asset finance from ABSA. Going off the beaten from ABSA. Overcoming all obstacles.
Drama is always just round the corner on an off-road race, and soon after the start of the second loop, Gearbox Melodies sidelined Hannes Grobler and Joan Moore in the Donaldson Nissan Navara, and Hugo and Jaap de Bruin in the Micron Excel Toyota Hilux.
In a remarkable comeback from 25th on the road, Duncan Foss and Ralph Pitchford suddenly found themselves in the lead, but all was not well with the Donaldson Nissan crew, with the note being handed over to team members at a spectator point.
Yeah, it looks Duncan's not feeling very well. He's got some gastro or something, and he's vomiting in the car, so that's not good news, really. But he's got a healthy lead, which was 6 minutes lead for around about half an hour ago, so we'll see if he's able to keep up the pace till the end.
After losing time at the designated service point, replacing a damaged wheel hub, Evan Hutchinson and Achim Bergman dropped back to 5th place in the special vehicle category. With the demise of Clint Gibson and Gary Campbell and the Rapsa Bat, the Motorride crew were soon back at the front of the field and pushing as hard as ever. Also on the move were Shamir Variawa and Siegfried Rousseau, who'd taken the Total Porter into 2nd place.
Still going along steadily were Mike Whitehouse and brother-in-law Matthew Carlson, who had a firm grip on a podium place in the Regent Racing Bat.
The demise of Grobler Moore and the De Bruin Toyota, along with problems for Hein Lateghan and Chris Birkin, lifted Thomas Rundle and Henny Terstege into 2nd place in the production vehicle category. The Ford was minus some bodywork, but the pair were on their way to a dream result. Ivar Tollefson and Quinn Evans had a grip on the final podium place, and a dream result was also there for the taking by Gary Berthold and Andre Vermeulen, who were running strongly in 4th place in the Atlas Copco Toyota Hilux. Behind them, Chris Visser and Jaapie Badenhorst were in a solid 5th in the RFS Toyota Hilux.
Hy kan jong. Kom my karre.
The Class P battle was all but settled, with former Class B champions Jan and Hendrik Kraai putting a little daylight between themselves and Johan van Staden and James Rousseau in the KEC bat. It was an impressive performance from the unheralded van Staden and Rousseau, who are the reigning Northern Regions champions.
Van Staden and Rousseau were being chased in the closing stages by Nick and Ryan Harper, who'd made up ground in the Atlas Copco Bat, and reigning SA champions Cully and Quinton Sulwald, who'd endured a tough day at the office.
An overshoot supplied George and Sharon Barkhuizen with a little late excitement. They disappeared down a side road at a rapid rate of knots in the AIM Toyota Hilux. The incident got the juices flowing, but did not cost them much time, and the Bloemfontein husband and wife team were a solid 6th in class after losing time stuck in a hole on the first loop of the race.
For the Besaidnout brothers, Johan and Etienne, the event was what they described as character building. They had no brakes on the prologue and finished the race without a clutch. Under the circumstances, the brothers were more than happy to salvage championship points with a 3rd place in Class P.
The impressive Dion Venter and Ian Palmer had a second successive Class E win in the bag in the 4x4 Mega World Toyota Hilux and were also a solid 7th overall in the production vehicle category. Hein Lateghan and Chris Birkin salvaged points after Loop 2 problems, and Toyota grabbed a second class win when Cliff and Louis Weichelt gradually ground the Class D competition into submission. Dewald van Breda and Jan de Tooy held on for second in Class D, and Pikkie Labuschagne and Rikus Erasmus completed a good day for the 4x4 Mega World squad.
Herman and Wichard Soelwald plugged away to finish 8th overall in the special vehicle category. Right behind them were Naeem Musaji and Mohammed Mulston in the Tyre Rack Jimco, who were second on the Adenko 400. The two crews also lost time helping each other out of awkward situations and were happy just to make it to the finish.
Right at the back of the field, there were a handful of crews for whom time was of the essence. They were battling to beat the time bar cutoff. Henny Strumpfer and Jan-Hendrik van der Linde clinched a podium place in Class D in only their second outing, with brothers David and Gary White overcoming a whole series of problems to bring the Rokon Racing back home in 4th place in Class P.
Former champions Richard Schilling and Chris Davies struggled along gamely to finish 5th in Class P in the ACECO, with Bappi Rubeluza and Kulili Vakeliza the last of the classified finishers in the Ford Racing Ranger. A gutsy performance also earned them a podium place in Class E.
Back at the finish at Mentor's Kraal, there was a large crowd on hand to see Duncan Voss and Ralph Pitchford bring the Donaldson Nissan Navara home 1st overall and 1st in the SP class. With Voss having to overcome a severe bout of car sickness, it was a performance full of character and gave the pair their second win this season.
Just over 5 minutes behind Voss and Pitchford were Special Vehicle and Class A winners Evan Hutchinson and Achim Bergman in the impressive Motorite Revo 1 4x4. It was also their second win of the season.
Second overall in the Special Vehicle category was Shamir Variawa and Siegfried Rousseau, who started 11th on the road and 5th in Class A.
The final place on the special vehicle podium went to Mike Whitehouse and Matthew Carlson in the Regent Racing Bat, who put together a solid performance.
Second overall in the production vehicle category was a fairy tale result for Thomas Rundle in his SP class debut.
This is just a big dream for me come true.
Henny, you've been in many cars in your life. What do you think of the Ford?
As he said, the car is 3 years old, but it's still going strong. There was nothing wrong. It went 100%. Didn't have any problem. We had one flat tire this morning. And for the rest, no, it went well. And he's a very good driver. I'll see great things for him in the future.
Behind Lateghan, a recent recruit to the Castrol Toyota team, an off-road baptism of fire continued with another mishap on Loop 2.
We were lying third after the SP and going through the tunnel. My wheel get caught on the left-hand side of the tunnel into a water gully. And I tried to turn out of it, and the car swinged over, hit a concrete block on the right and flipped over at the end of the tunnel. And basically everybody, a lot of people passed us, and then Chris Visser came there, and he actually stopped to help pull us back on our wheels. So it was unbelievable of him to do that.
For the other SP class debutant, Gary Berthold, 4th place in the production vehicle class, was also a dream result.
Yeah, very interesting outing. Great to be the first privateer, first Toyota home. Big difference between racing an SP and racing a space special vehicle. I think the SP got to be more precise, much neater, no room for error. It's much closer racing. Level up, and I'm very impressed. I thank Atlas Copco for their support. Toyota have done a great job in helping us, and to Kenny Veringer and Craig Kinch and Justin Allen for building this car. It's amazing.
Class B winners Jan and Hendrik Kraai were also 4th overall in the special vehicle category.
I did the first half, the time trial in the first half, and then we swapped over at refuel, and then my dad drove the way home.
Jan, what do you prefer, driving or navigating?
I like both. The
the navigating in the first loop is challenging, so it's important that you navigate good in the first loop. In the second loop it's a bit easier, so but I prefer the driving.
A second win in a row for Evan Hutchison and Achim Bergman, who had nearly 2 minutes to spare over Shamir Variawa and Siegfried Rousseau. There were also great performances from the Cries and Johan van Staden and James Rousseau in Class P.
For Evan Hutchinson, it had been a topsy-turvy day.
Yeah, it's been a hell of a day. We had a good morning. We got up into the lead, and then we had some problems when we came into the pits, so we dropped back up 5th place. So those mountains became very, very steep and sharp, trying to catch and pass the guys. So it's been a hell of a run, yeah.
In the production vehicle category, Duncan Vos and Ralph Pitchford had nearly 12 minutes to spare over Thomas Rundle and Henny Terstegen. Ivar Tollefson and Quinn Evans gave Nissan a second podium place, with the rest of the top 10 filled out by Toyota Hilux models.
For Duncan Vos and Ralph Pitchford, it had been anything but a drive through the park.
Today we started off first and we thought we'd just take it easy, but 6 kilometers into the race we had no brakes, so we had to stop and do some roadside repairs. It took us about 8 minutes to fix the problem, and we're back on track in 25th position.
The traditional spraying of the champagne put the finishing touches to what had been a highly interesting race, with high praise for the route and a job well done by clerk of the course Joe Ferree and his team from the Algoa Motorsport Club.
After 2 rounds, Duncan Vos and Ralph Pitchford have a healthy lead at the top of the Production Vehicle Championship. 2 wins each this season see Dion Venter and Ian Palmer leading Class E, and Cliff and Louis Weichelt leading the Class D championships.
Two wins in 2 outings have also given Evan Hutchison and Achim Bergman a healthy early lead in the special vehicle category. The fight for 2nd and 3rd is a close one, with Johan and Etienne Besaidnout leading Class P and Bez and Dion Besaidnout Class B.
The ABSA Off-Road Championship moves to KwaZulu-Natal for round 3 of the series on May the 15th and 16th. Event headquarters is at the Beaumont Eston Farmers Club, and another testing route will bring out the best in South Africa's top off-road stars.
That was the ultimate test, the ABSA Off-Road Championship. Now fast-track yourself with vehicle and asset finance from ABSA. Today, tomorrow, together. With vehicle